Hi there, I'm Stacy, the encaustic mixed media artist behind Studio Stacy. Encaustic literally means to burn in. So I paint with beeswax and a torch, and because it's mixed media, pretty much anything else I can get my hands on. If you're new around here, welcome. If you're a returning viewer, welcome back. Consider subscribing and joining this artsy community. Don't forget to hit that thumbs up button, which helps me get introduced to more like-minded artsy folks like yourself. Hi all. Today's video I think is going to be slightly different, and then I'm going to answer some of your top 2 questions, and then throw in a third question that I got somewhat recently. And that's because the studio is a complete disaster in here. I have to clean it up. Sorry if you hear that clicking, the griddle is on because it's a mess and it needs to heat up so I can clean it off. But at any rate, you've seen me clean the studio before, and it's not super exciting. So instead of you watching me clean the studio, I thought I would answer some of your questions instead. All right, so probably the number 1 question I get is about safety concerning encaustic, specifically encaustic fumes. So it's either around encaustic fumes or ventilation, kind of the broad topic here. And you'll notice I don't have an exhaust over my griddle. There are encaustic artists that have huge exhaust fans mounted above their griddle surface, their heated surface, that will suck the air out. They're almost like commercial units. I don't have that. I have never had that in this studio or in my previous studio. And that has never been a problem to me. And I should kind of back up here maybe. And if you don't heat your wax up to the proper temperature, it can be toxic. So the number 1 thing I recommend having is a surface thermometer. I have that on my flat griddle, and I have a candy thermometer in my encaustic medium because that's in a, I guess it's considered a fry pan. I'm not really sure, I'll show you, but at any rate, so the number 1 thing I always recommend is thermometers, either a surface thermometer on your griddle, or if you have a fry pan like I do, get a candy thermometer so it can sit in the wax. And then you always know the temperature of your surface and your wax. Because these griddles are not meant to be precise, my griddle I actually only turn down to the very lowest temperature, which is 150 degrees. And that seems perfect. While other people might turn theirs up to maybe 160, 180, maybe even 200. These aren't like an exact science on these griddles, or as far as an exact temperature. And I just kind of, throughout the years, have kept monitored that. Every time I get a new griddle, I double check the temperature on it. And that's the number 1 safety. Because if you don't heat the encaustic wax up too hot, it's technically not toxic. So having said that, I also have 2 windows that I can open up here in this particular studio, and that gives me a cross ventilation here. And sometimes I will do that if I'm working on big panels or if I'm in the studio all day long with the wax. However, I must say I have never, I should knock on some wood here, gotten a headache, gotten, bad allergies, none of that from working with encaustic. And I just think the main reason is because I make sure I keep the wax at this temperature. Now, again, having said that, you may be one of those people that are much more sensitive to the beeswax encaustic paint smell, and you might need to have more ventilation. If that's the case, you could look into one of those big commercial fans, not vans, I don't know where I got that from, big commercial fan, and consider that in your studio. Or they make inexpensive window fans that you can turn on to suck the air out of the space. which I did actually use a few times in the old studio. It hasn't really been a problem in here, even though this is actually technically a smaller space, but I think having the 2 windows, and like I said, sometimes I don't even open those windows and I'm fine. Now, not recommending that for everyone, but I'm just answering the question on how I approach the ventilation system and safety with encaustic fumes. The other thing to consider is how much, once you've painted your panel, how much then you heat your panel back up. You don't want to remelt that wax and just turn it into a solid, or not a solid, turn it into a complete liquid form, have it kind of dripping off of your panel. You know, once it's on there, you just want to fuse it so it fuses to the layer below. Just kind of warm it up nicely, fuse it lightly, and you're good to go. And again, you don't want to reheat it too much or to a complete melted state, because that can cause some fumes and you don't want to be breathing those in. So there's my other tip. All right, the second most popular question I get asked about is my torch. Specifically, what torch it is, and then the hose that I have attached to it. What's that hose attached to? How does that work? All of that stuff. So this torch, it's a Bernzomatic, that I know, but I think it's the TS3500. If that's not correct, I'll put it here on the screen. And I will try to link all of these things that I'm talking about down below there in the description box, so you can check those out if you want. But it's a Bernzomatic, and then let me flip the camera around and show you what this hose is set up to, and the kind of the configuration that I have set up for the torch. All right, so as you can see now, you could attach this directly to a propane bottle. A Bernzomatic propane bottle specifically. I don't do that because I find that it gets heavy. And apparently I'm a wimp. But at any rate, I have it attached to this hose, and it's a hose kit that you can buy through Bernzomatic, and they might have it at hardware stores. I'm not 100% sure. But this hose kit comes with this hook. And this hook, oh sorry, got you out of camera there. This hook is actually meant to hook onto like a tool belt, but I just have a eyelet up here. I think you can see that. Yep, an eyelet up there, and it's screwed in under my desk. And then let me pull it out and I'll show you a little bit more detail of it. All right, so here's the tanks that I use, and you can buy these at most hardware stores. So the tank is very easy to find. And matter of fact, a torch I think you can get at hardware stores. This hose kit, however, which comes with the hose and then this hook, is a little bit harder to find. And this hook just hooks onto, I think you can see that. So the tank doesn't come off of here. It's great. And then the other thing is also nice is there's this dial here which you can turn it off or on. So like if I'm going to know I'm going to be out of the studio for several days, or we're going on vacation or a trip somewhere, I can just turn this all the way off, run the gas out of the hose, and you know, everything's empty. Or I could just unscrew this and hook it from the tank as well. But this I probably get asked the most about, along with the torch, or rather the second most. So any rate, hopefully that was helpful. And then the last question I'll touch on today was a question I got asked more recently, and I know I've touched on this in the past, but it's basically how I clean my brushes. And the other day when I was in here in the studio, I showed you how I clean my griddle, so I'll insert clips of that here now. I have some leftover paint left on my griddle, so I'm just going to take my plain old sketchbook, dip it into this paint, and get the majority of it off of the griddle. And this way I'm not quote unquote wasting any paint. It's kind of just going into my sketchbook for perhaps a future sketch or painting maybe. And as you can see, this is a very well-loved sketchbook. And a lot of times what happens, if I pan over here, is you can see some other leftover encaustic paint kind of comes off of that sketchbook, but I don't worry about it. It's just a, you know, work in progress. So that's step number 1 to cleaning the griddle. Step number 2 involves this catalyst, rubber catalyst tool. It doesn't scratch the griddle, so it's great. And I can just take and scrape this paint, leftover paint off. If I wanted to dip the sketchbook in it again, I could. But most of the time, there's not too much paint here. I just take and dump it into the drip tray. And as you can see, that gets the griddle cleaned off pretty well. If I know I'm going to switch out this color, like this was a yellowish color, if I know I'm going to switch it out to say like a purple or something that's really going to alter the color and make mud, I also take and sprinkle some of this R&F soy wax onto the griddle. And then I just take a clean paper towel and carefully, I say carefully because you don't want to burn yourself. The griddle is hot. And just wipe off any excess that might still be on there. And this cleans it off really nicely. Alright, so now that I have the griddle basically cleaned off, I'm going to show you how I clean and take care of my brushes. Alright, step number 1 is I just want to squeeze out, there's a lot of paint still in this brush here. So just want to squeeze all of that out, and I just use that's the same catalyst that I use to scrape the griddle. I use to scrape out the paint, the excess paint of the brush. Get most of it out, and I'm just doing this gently. I'm not like really, you know, just rubbing really hard on this brush. I'm just doing it ever so gently. I don't want to pull a bunch of bristles out or anything like that. Getting most of the paint out. Then once most of that paint is out, I'm just gonna scrape it into the drip tray to get it out of the way. I could also smush it onto my sketchbook, but in this case, for simplicity, I'm just going to scrape it into the drip tray. And for a brush cleaner, I use R&F soy wax. So I think there, that seems to focus for you. R&F soy wax, and it's sometimes called brush cleaner, or sometimes just called soy wax, but that's what I use. I simply take some out of the bag, sprinkle it on my brush and the griddle. I don't worry about it. I'm not super picky about how much I use or how much of this blue I'm getting out of my brush, and I'll explain that in a second. Just kind of want the majority of it out. And then I take a clean paper towel, and careful, this is going to be hot, so if your hands are sensitive, don't do this, wear gloves or something. But I just kind of squeeze it out, getting more of that encaustic paint out. And I could also just squeeze it onto the griddle using the catalyst as well. And then I'm just going to do that same exact process with these other 2 brushes. And I wanted to show you one more thing about my brushes while we're on the topic of brushes. And that is, these brushes are all my little mini brushes, but I just have these brushes and the brushes you see hanging on the wall here. So I do not have a brush for every single color of paint that I have. I instead have one brush for each color family. So this is my blue brush, my pink and purple, yellow, green. This is also a, oops, sorry, out of camera there. This is also a purple-ish brush. This is my red, sorry, out of camera again. I'm really sorry about this. I'll stop reaching over and maybe zoom in. All right, that's my red brush. Then down here I have this little black brush and a brown brush. And then behind here I kind of have like a dirty-ish, rusty kind of, and then this could be used for another yellow. So I don't have a lot of brushes at all. And if I pan over, I do have a couple clean brushes over here that I could dip into if I wanted to. So I just wanted to point that out. Brushes can be expensive. You need natural bristle. Most of the time I use Hake. I have some chip brushes, but they don't work nearly as nice as the Hake brushes do. They will work if you're in a pinch or on a really tight budget. But I really do like the Hake natural bristle brushes for encaustic. But you don't need a lot of them. That's my whole point. Like if you're a beginning encaustic artist, or even if you've been doing encaustic artist for many years, like myself, I've painted I don't know how many paintings with just those few brushes. So you don't need a lot. And I just wanted to make sure to point that out, which is why I'm not super concerned with getting all of the yellow paint or all of the blue paint out of that brush, because I personally don't mind if one color blue gets mixed in slightly with another color blue. It doesn't bother me. All right, so I hope you enjoyed that kind of quick Q&A session. If you have any questions, as always, leave them down there below in the comments. I'm happy to answer anything and everything. So if you have a burning question that you haven't asked, definitely let me know down there below in the comments. If you found this video helpful, or in the very least enjoyable, please give it a thumbs up. It truly does help me out, and I really, really, really genuinely appreciate all of your likes, all of your comments. It really does mean the world to me. Stay tuned in the next studio video. I believe it's going to be a painting video, which is why I'm cleaning this mess up in here, because I'm going to be pulling out some big panels. At least that's what I'm thinking about doing. So anyway, stay tuned for that. Thanks again for coming along on this one. We'll see you on the next one. Bye for now.